All right. Thank you, Allison, for getting our recording started. I know we still have some folks joining us. We'll likely have more flowing in here, but recognizing we have an hour and these hour sessions have been flying by very quickly. And as we also look ahead to other sessions, we're going to keep that in mind and consider whether we need to build in more time for future sessions that we'll be announcing. But I'm going to go ahead and get us kicked off here in the interest of time. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all here and welcome on behalf of the Natural Medicine Division. A reminder, as you all heard, we are recording this meeting. Today is Wednesday, September 27th, and it is 10:01 a.m. My name is Dominique Mendiola, and I serve as the Senior Director for the Colorado Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division. Today, we are hosting our fourth listening session for the implementation of Senate Bill 23-290. And this directs our stand-up of a regulatory framework for natural medicine operations here in Colorado. We are going to begin our formal rulemaking in 2024, and that's all leading up to our expectations of when we will begin accepting applications for licensing. And that begins December 31st of 2024. Your participation in these sessions will help inform our development of the regulatory framework for natural medicine operations. I am joined here today by my co-chair, Allison Robinette, who serves as the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for the division, as well as our colleagues, Kyle Lambert, Heather Krug, and Julia Bramante with the Department of Public Health and Environment, and as well as the Governor's Office. We have Ian Seabon. We are also joined by our colleagues with the Department of Regulatory Agency, Sam Barami. So Sam is the Senior Advisor on Natural Medicine Services and has been working very closely with the Natural Medicine Advisory Board. We have an advisory board member, Dr. Sue Sicily, in attendance today on behalf of the board. And joining us from the Colorado Department of Law, we have Christy DeMaria and Paige Olson, who represent the Natural Medicine Division. Today's session is intended to start the conversation about a regulated natural medicine laboratory testing program that the department is required to implement. Our partners at the Department of Public Health and Environment will also have a distinct role in our establishment of testing requirements, including certification requirements for categories of testing. We look forward to hearing from you all today. Also, we are going to be scheduling additional listening sessions before we move into a more formal rulemaking process. And to be clear, those formal proceedings will also provide opportunities for stakeholder engagement and feedback. In any event, these initial discussions are helping us identify where we will focus our next round of listening sessions. So stay tuned for updates on that. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Allison, to take us through some logistics for our participation today.
Thanks, Dominique, and good morning, everyone. So glad to see you all here again today. This meeting is being recorded, as Dominique mentioned, and the chat has been disabled so that we can focus on the discussion. When we open up the floor for discussion, we ask that you come off mute and introduce yourself, including your name and any organization you represent. If you're joining our Zoom meeting on the phone, you can raise and lower your hand by dialing *9, and you can mute and unmute by dialing *6. We will be monitoring the queue to make sure we are reserving enough time for anyone who wants to make a comment today or provide input or ask questions. And while there's no limit to the number of comments you make, we ask that you try to limit each comment at a time to 2 minutes, so we're providing enough time for hear from everyone who wants to be part of this discussion today. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Allison. So I'm going to give us some background that we've touched on in our previous sessions, but want to make sure we're hitting on that here. And this relates just to the overall context of the work that we're doing here within our department. Under Proposition 122 and now Senate Bill 290, there are three aspects to what the proposition and bill changed in our laws. First, the measure authorizes the personal use of natural medicines, including allowances for the personal cultivation, possession, and use. For personal cultivation, individuals are restricted to cultivating natural medicine in not more than 12 feet by 12 feet on private property, and that's defined in statute. And that area must be enclosed and locked. For personal possession and use, there is no personal possession limit built into the law, and individuals are permitted to share with another adult over the age of 21. And there are also some additional, there's additional context in the bill around those sharing allowances. With the permissions, there are also some restrictions on personal possession and use, including prohibitions against accepting payment for natural medicine and manufacturing with inherently dangerous substances, among other restrictions. Second, the proposition and law authorized our partners at the Department of Regulatory Agencies to license and regulate facilitators of natural medicine services. And third, the law authorized and directed the Department of Revenue to license and regulate healing centers, cultivations, manufacturers, and testing facilities, and assigned other duties, including data collection and reporting, as well as development of public education and first responder training materials, just to name a few. In previous sessions, we had provided more background and detail about the department's responsibilities under the Natural Medicine Code. Those meetings are recorded and available on our division's website. So just know that that information is available to you, along with the meeting materials that we used for those sessions, like our agenda and slide decks, and other resources, including a summary of Senate Bill 290 that we developed to support our implementation work. Allison is going to take us through the statutory requirements that we'll focus on in today's discussion.
As Dominique mentioned, our focus today is on the implementation of a testing program that DOR and the Department of Public Health and Environment will be closely coordinating on to implement. Under Title 44, the Department of Revenue is responsible for licensing regulated natural medicine testing facilities and then establishing a testing program through rulemaking in coordination with the Department of Public Health and Environment. For licensing of testing facilities, the Natural Medicine Code, and this is for those of you with the bill in front of you or looking at statutory terms, we're looking at Section 44-50-404, and it directs that a license may be issued only to a person who performs testing and research on natural medicine. Testing is a matter of statewide concern, and a testing facility licensee cannot have an interest in another regulated natural medicine facility license, for example, a manufacturing, cultivation, or a healing center license. The testing program itself must be an independent testing program. So one way we can see this already is through the restriction in statute on holding a testing facility license and another natural medicine facility license type. The testing program at a minimum needs to ensure product does not contain contaminants injurious to health and to ensure correct labeling. And it also requires that results cannot be used unless the lab, the licensed testing facility lab, is certified. Testing procedures and frequency need to be accounted for and addressed through rules. And we also have some other rulemaking authority around definitions, prohibitions, and prohibitions concerning conflicts of interest and procedures and requirements necessary for coordination with CDPHE. Additional rulemaking authority directs the state licensing authority. Rules must, but are not limited to standards, quality control analyses, equipment requirements. So that would be certification for equipment, calibration of equipment, identification of chemicals and other substances used in bona fide research methods, and whether to allow unlicensed individuals who are over 21 to request and use testing services for personal use. And as Heather with the CDPHE will expand on in a moment, we do see some overlapping regulatory authority in Senate Bill 290 as a result of the legislative direction to closely coordinate between the agencies. With that in mind, for the Department of Revenue, we foresee our initial role in this program to adopt those baseline standards for testing programs in our rules. For example, which test licensees are required to conduct on natural medicine, and in order to allow the product to be offered to facilitators and participants, and as including when and how frequently required testing needs to occur, as well as sample collection procedures. Again, all of this will be going on in close coordination with the CDPHE. As an initial implementation consideration, we are focused on establishing the testing program for regulated natural medicine. That's the primary mandate as it relates to standing up the testing program within DOR. And so that is our priority at this time. After we have a better understanding of the impacts of implementation and additional required resources that may be needed, we will then explore how testing for personal use could fit into this framework. So that will be a later step. And with that, I will pass it over to our colleagues at the Department of Public Health and Environment.
Morning, everyone. My name is Heather Krug. I'm with CDPHE. So under Title 25, CDPHE is responsible for establishing a testing and certification program through rulemaking in coordination with DOR. The testing and certification program must require that testing is appropriate to ensure the correct labeling of products and ensure that products are free of contaminants that may be injurious to health. We must also establish an acceptable variant for concentration representations and procedures to address concentration misrepresentation. We also need to, in our rules, establish procedures that ensure natural medicine and natural medicine products are quarantined, and any notification procedures if test results indicate presence of quantities of any substance determined to be injurious to health. And the rules must also establish the protocols of testing natural medicine. So with that in mind, for CDPHE, our initial role is primarily to establish the certification requirements for laboratories performing natural medicine testing to ensure technical competence of laboratories and consistency in testing, so that those test results can be used to ensure accurate labeling and contaminant-free products. And of course, all of this will be done in close coordination with DOR. With that, we will move into a quick presentation on our current testing programs, particularly in the cannabis arena. So I will start us off, and our colleagues Kyle and Julia will join. So in Colorado, our current cannabis testing requirements look as we will outline. All required testing, as may be similar to natural medicines, must be performed by third-party testing facilities that are licensed and certified by the MED. Certification of those laboratories is granted in close collaboration with CDPHE, who performs audits of these laboratories to evaluate whether the certification requirements have been met and that the lab has demonstrated technical competence in the categories of required testing. Also, the MED rules outline test batch collection procedures, as well as requirements for documented training of individuals collecting these samples. So the samples can be collected by the manufacturers or cultivators themselves, but the samples must be collected in accordance with those detailed protocols, which are outlined in CDPHE's marijuana testing reference library, which is located on our website. Training of staff performing test batch sampling must include training on these protocols, as well as information on preventing cross-contamination, record keeping, and penalties for test batch adulteration or alteration. All samples must be transferred to testing facilities on a documented manner using a manifest to accurately record the chain of custody of those materials. When laboratories receive those samples, they are required to take photographs of the samples upon receipt to document the condition of the test batch. And then all test results obtained by the laboratory must be reported in the inventory tracking system. So that would be available to the MED. Now I will turn it over to Kyle.
Thanks, Heather. Good morning, everybody. Kyle Lambert with the Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division. And we can go to the next slide there. So within, just again, expanding a little bit on the cannabis testing program, just for reference, within the rules, there are established limits that are documented per the contaminant test type that is tested for. These limits are based on health risks and United States Pharmacopoeia guidelines, and that is based on the intended mode of administration. That may differ if it's intended to be orally consumed or inhaled. A topical, those are the different modes of administration that we're talking about there, are the intended uses. For pesticides, a little separate, those action limits for pesticides are based on detection and reproducibility by testing facilities. So that was established through a form of a study where testing facilities were given the various pesticides that needed to be tested for, and then the results of each testing facility's ability to detect and reproduce those results consistently informed the establishment of action limits for pesticide testing of cannabis. With failed testing procedures, if a test does fail a particular contaminant, there are different pathways that can be taken for that batch that fails, and that is dependent on the contaminant test type that the batch failed for, and then the ability to address a failure. So beyond just a destruction and some of the things listed there, there is an opportunity for retesting to occur to confirm that the failed test applies to the batch. And then once the retest is confirmed, if there remains failure of the batch, there are different pathways that the batch can go based on that contaminant type. So for pesticides, there really is nothing other than the product must be destroyed. There's not known methods to decontaminate or remediate that particular contaminant. But you can see for microbial and elemental impurities, there are opportunities to potentially continue to decontaminate that batch, which may look in different forms, or remediate, which in cannabis would mean to take the flower plant material and turn it into a solvent-based concentrate with the intention of mitigating the microbial contamination. So just wanted to highlight the different pathways on failed testing procedures. And then if we just go to one more slide on the cannabis testing program, just to highlight a little further what Heather mentioned as far as the sample collection, the test batch collection. The regulations require that the testing occurs on finished product before it leaves a licensed facility. So in general terms, that is product that is completed its processes and is ready for transfer either to another business or to a consumer. The samples must be collected by 2 designated test batch collectors. And as Heather mentioned, there is documented training that's available. There's actually a video that was created as a resource to also support proper sample collection techniques, and it must be done under video surveillance. As far as the size of a test batch, that determines on the size of the batch that it represents. If it's a 10-pound, say, batch of plant material, there would be a certain number of increments meaning number of samples that are pulled to comprise a full test batch. If that harvest batch was 100 pounds, there would need to be more increments than a 10-pound batch. So the test batch size can vary based on the size of the harvest batch it represents. And again, that's intended to be more representative of the batch itself. And then the sample collection is intended to be a random selection of those samples throughout the batch. So again, just wanted to highlight those additional cannabis testing regs. There's many layers to it, but that's kind of a high-level overview. And I'll pass it on to Julia to discuss a different program.
Thank you so much, Kyle, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me on today. My name is Julia Bramante, and again, I'm with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So for the Oregon psilocybin rules, we're going to reference today the Oregon Health Authority Rules Section 333-333 as stated, which established the minimum compliance testing standards for psilocybin products. General testing requirements outline that at least one speciation test that must be taken from the first harvest lot recorded per calendar year shall be requested and performed to verify that the lot only consists of psilocybe cubensis. Additionally, a manufacturer must order tests for every batch of finished psilocybin product from a harvest lot or process lot to determine the concentration, also termed potency, of psilocybin and psilocin in the product. Additionally, solvent tests are required if methanol or acetic acid are used to manufacture the psilocybin extract. And other testing, such as microbial contamination, pesticides, and heavy metals, are required on each harvest or process lot as requested by the authority. And so I outlined on the next slide some failed testing procedures. So depending on the failed test, there are different requirements as a manufacturer may proceed. And in some instances, a process for retesting is outlined. But generally, if after all other options have been conducted, a test is deemed to have failed, then the following actions should occur. So if a speciation test fails, then every following harvest lot must be speciation tested for a period of 12 months. If solvents fail, then a product may be remediated or destroyed. If microbial contamination fails, then the product must be destroyed. If heavy metals or pesticides fails, then the product must be destroyed. And if potency fails, then the product may be remixed or destroyed. And now I'll pass it on to Allison, who will give an overview of presentation discussion questions.
Thanks, everyone. So we provided some discussion items ahead of this meeting, and we're going to jump right in. But I wanted to note from the outset that while natural medicine is a broad term encompassing several different types of natural medicines, for purposes of initial implementation based on Senate Bill 290, and for today's discussion, we're really focused on psilocybin and what those initial testing measures should be for psilocybin. So for today, we're interested in hearing from folks about what testing categories are most critical for natural medicine. For example, is that speciation? Is it heavy metals or elemental impurities, microbial contaminants? And what testing categories are specific to certain types of natural medicine? So something that should be specific to psilocybin mushrooms as opposed to another type of natural medicine. And initially, how frequently should the rules require licensees to conduct the required testing? Other questions we put forward were, at what points should testing occur? So is that prior to transfer to a facilitator or to a healing center, or at some other time? Who should be responsible for submitting samples for testing? Would that be the cultivator, manufacturer, the ultimate healing center who would be administering natural medicine in an administration session? And should DOR licensed regulated marijuana testing facilities be permitted to test natural medicine? And an important note here is that under current statutory terms, this is prohibited. So it would require a statutory change if folks think that this is a desirable path forward. As a reminder, please raise your hand and we'll make every effort to work through our queue in the order that your hands go up. When you come off mute, please introduce yourself so we both know both your name and any organization you may be representing today. If you would like us to toggle between the discussion question slides, just let me know. And if you're looking at a specific question, that'll help us in taking our notes and making sure we're asking follow-up questions where needed. So with that, we'll start with Jonathan Cherkos.
Hi. I have a couple things I want to say, but real quick on the DOR licensed marijuana testing facilities. I'm Jonathan Cherkis. I'm with Collab Consulting. So currently labs are able to test home grow things. On the DOR side, I would be on the licensed testing facilities, I would be concerned that similarly to the way marijuana has the issue of which home grow cannot enter into the metric system, which means licensed facilities can't test it. I would be concerned that those labs would probably fall under the same rules. It may be something where there could be an exception carved out, but that's just whatever on my side. The other thing that I was thinking about on testing is that it may be worth looking at moisture content. So moisture, I'm gonna get a little nerdy. The dephosphorylation of psilocybin into psilocin can be caused by moisture. So it's a hydrolytic reaction. And so it's possible that if things had too much moisture, at the time when things are tested, they're usually dried. I know that Altitude Consulting in Englewood, they do freeze dry their samples. And so by doing that, there's no moisture in those, but if there's moisture in the original content, that there may be variations within the psilocybin testing, which then brings me to that, which is that psilocin is not tested in Oregon. I think that was a big oversight on their part. So psilocin is, in a really bad example, sort of the active form of psilocybin. And so during any extractions with water or anything like that, you actually only really end up with psilocin, which degrades really quickly. And so by not testing for that, you can both miss a large amount of potency and also a large amount of variation. The last thing is the speciation on cubensis. If we're concerned about psilocybin and psilocin content and whatever other categories we decide to test for, then cubensis, it's not necessarily the right way to describe it, because there's a lot of other psilocybe strains that contain psilocybin and don't contain other compounds, versus something like Amanita, again, which contains an entirely different compound. And so it's just something to think about. That's all. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Jonathan, and certainly looking for other hands to come up here for others who want to contribute to the discussion, but also while we're looking for those other hands, Jonathan wanted to touch on some of what you covered. Thank you for your feedback on this, and appreciate your flags on if we were to explore an opportunity to pursue a statutory change that would allow marijuana our licensed laboratories to be able to provide this service and engage in this category of testing, or as we look to establish those requirements for natural medicines. It is going to be important for us to look at what sort of hurdles do we see in that apply to those marijuana testing facilities that we might also need to address to make sure that we're providing that avenue in a way that complements both the marijuana code and natural medicine code. So appreciate just what you flagged for that purpose. All right.
We'll go next to Colton Brook.
Yeah, hi. My name's Colton Brook. I'm the lab manager at Altitude Consulting. Jonathan was just talking about us. We're one of the labs that's doing testing on natural medicine currently. So I figured I would give some input on just sort of what we've seen sample-wise come in. Just to start more on the mushroom side of things, specifically regarding the potency testing. The shelf life studies that we've seen that the potency of psilocybin and also psilocin can degrade pretty rapidly, maybe within 3 months. Based on our studies, we've seen a decrease of about 30% of psilocin, about 11% psilocybin. Of course, this is going to be dependent on storage conditions. The study that we ran was simply just put in a styrofoam bag, away from light, just kept at room temperature. So that's not necessarily the best way to store this stuff, obviously. But as far as how often people or licensees are going to have to be testing, that's just something to keep in mind. I think there's probably going to have to be more studies done on specifically shelf life and also just storage conditions. So we've noticed that depending on if the products are freeze dried or dehydrated, if desiccant packs are used, all of these things can really impact storage, like the actual shelf life of the product. Also, I just wanted to touch on the heavy metals. We've seen that heavy metals have pretty much been I would say, #1 contaminant we've seen regarding mushrooms specifically. Of course, once you get into things like residual solvents, if you're not dealing with something like a concentrate, that's probably going to be more commonly done on something like DMT. I know you said that for the purposes of this, it seems like we're focusing more on the mushroom side of things. But really, heavy metals have been probably the biggest concern, just from the laboratory aspect on the mushrooms. And we've done things like pesticide analyses. There haven't been many tests done on that many samples of mushrooms on pesticides. So I don't have a lot of data on that. I would be kind of surprised if pesticides are being used heavily, just with the grow conditions. But again, I don't have too much data on that end. I think that was just to touch on the moisture content thing as well, that Jonathan brought up. I think that is very valid, as he was describing. Any amount of water, once these mushrooms are harvested, we've seen that will rapidly catalyze the reaction from psilocybin to psilocin. And so again, if there is water content in a product, being a mushroom, whatever that testing result was, that could rapidly change if water's introduced to the system. That's all I wanted to touch on.
Thank you so much. And for my benefit, are you, Colton and Jonathan, both, is your testing facility in Oregon?
No, so we're in Inglewood, Colorado.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not, I just know them.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Appreciate that. Next, we'll go to Nicholas Dolphin.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Dolphin. I run a fabrication company, Dolphin Fabrication. I'm registered with SAM.gov as a service disabled veteran owner of small business. I was a Marine Corps machine gunner. I fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. I use psilocybin to help me with my PTSD. It also helped me quit smoking and quit drinking. But I was wondering about the manufacturing process when it becomes large scale. I'm from the Philadelphia area, and I did a lot of work in Kennett Square. I don't know if anybody knows that. It's like where most of America's portobellos come from, right? So they do all sorts of food grade mushroom grow, and I was wondering if when large scale manufacturing comes to us, will it be treated as food and beverage, or will it be treated as like or
Nicholas, if you could repeat that last part of your comment, we kind of lost you for a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. So I was wondering if when full-scale manufacturing comes to Colorado, these facilities, are they going to be built as such for food and beverage requirements or pharmaceutical grade requirements? Did we get that?
Yeah, and thank you. Thank you for clarifying that last piece of your question. And I think that's something that we're still looking to explore and get feedback on, and looking to what Oregon is doing, and as far as anticipating some of the larger scale operations and what those expectations would look like. And October 3rd, if Allison, have that right, yes, is our listening session that will actually focus more specifically on manufacturing and cultivation practices and what sort of expectations we should be considering in regulation as well as allowances. And so that's the session that we're going to really be focusing more in on getting feedback related to exactly your question. So we don't have a specific answer to that question yet, because that's a part of our listening session work. We want to make sure that we're considering the range of perspectives and what folks see as best practice, and ultimately also what is operable, and what are the also costs that are tied into compliance with various requirements. We want to make sure that we're looking at different options for those regulatory requirements, and in assessing that at all angles to understand the full scope of impacts. So we don't have an answer to it yet, but our intention is to keep an open mind as we lead up to that more formal rulemaking, so that we are going about it in a very informed manner. And if you have any suggestions on what you think the right answer is between those different processes, would be interested in your feedback on that as well.
Yes, thank you, Dominique, for hitting on our next listening session. And before I forget and go to
Would
our
you be
next,
interested now or on the 3rd for manufacturing?
Yeah, if you have an answer you want to just give us at this point, that'd be great, and that could tee us up for the next session too.
Well, so in my experiences dealing with the Portobello factories in like Kennett Square, I mean, those are food grade. Those are, I mean, they're good enough for the entire country, right? Those guys ship mushrooms from Philadelphia all the way out to San Diego. So, I mean, food grade, I guess, is, I mean, we're eating these things, so I don't see why they should be any higher level than pharmaceutical grade. I'm just trying to get an idea of because I'd like to get into setting up these manufacturing facilities, building them, and I would like to know ahead of time what kind of equipment should I look into investing in. And but yeah, I think food grade is just fine. I mean, shouldn't be anything wild about that.
Thank you, Nicholas, for that. And we'll dig into that further on the 3rd. Hope that you can be there so we can get more into the details on that front. And it may also depend on what sort of products being manufactured that we can envision would be, that we would expect as a part of this process. That may further determine what, avenue we're looking at, but we'll dive into that more on the 3rd. So thank you. All right.
next we'll go to Noah.
Hi, I'm Noah Novello. I'm the founder of Friday Ventures. I do some analytical testing with an HPLC for potency for psychedelic mushrooms. And I wanted to touch on total active psilocin when it comes to how these products are going to be dosed and regulated. Because there's the two active psychedelic compounds are psilocybin and psilocin. But when we consume the mushroom, all of the psilocybin converts into psilocin, and there is a difference of about 30% in weight. So what I've been kind of talking to people about when they're trying to understand the potency of their product, that the one total number, their total active psilocin. So when they actually consume the mushroom and the psilocybin converts into psilocin, and adding that already present psilocin content to come up with that 1 milligram amount is something that I'm concerned about. If we're dosing by just psilocybin, then the actual milligrams that the person is going to feel is going to be 30% less than that weight that's advertised on the packaging. So total active psilocin is how I feel, one number that could be presented to have a more accurate description of the dosing and how it's going to actually affect the way that somebody feels. I also wanted to touch on the microbial, and we said that Oregon, their policy is to destroy product that has failed the microbial test, and we've seen with cannabis, and I've actually helped prove that case for Colorado, that the hydrocarbon remediation process successfully gets rid of the microbial contamination. So there definitely are successful methods for removing microbial contaminations with psychedelic mushrooms.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback.
Next, we'll go to Cheryl Bowie.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Bowie. I kind of have a little thing on social media that started with a government fellowship with the tribal organizations and the CDC and HHS and a few other organizations like Caring Ambassadors and NVHR, the National Viral Hepatitis Roundtable, and CDC Foundation. So I don't do anything really actively. I think my fellowship kind of fell apart just because of the tribal government's federal contracting. But I wanted to kind of touch on the point where you ask in the discussion question, should the cannabis labs be able to test, for natural medicine? And I just want to kind of hone it into reminding everyone, overall, we're creating an industry. And part of that is building a history that's really second to none. And one of the big chunks being kind of left out of this, because, and I don't know if any of you guys are aware, but just last week, the UNODC, the Office of Drug Control and Crime, they recommended that the drug schedule be changed and that more people do what Colorado and Alaska and other states like Oregon are doing. And so I just want to kind of bring it in that, Alaska Native and American Indian people, the indigenous population is kind of being left behind. We have a high rate of missing and murdered indigenous people. And I know it might kind of sound funny. What does this have to do with anything here? We really need labs. And so that's kind of what I advocate for, is helping educate people on the parts and pieces that are kind of missing in this fabric to kind of bring it closer together for when we do make a big thing. Because I think that we have an opportunity to help fund lab education and training for not only us, but the indigenous population too. They handle all of our law enforcement in all of our healthcare. And unless we really step up and push for them to get the kind of training and education that we need to have those programs run just as successfully as this program is starting to blossom, I think we're missing a big part of it. And I think that we need to revisit our understanding of what the law is when we're making these kinds of changes, because we're getting left behind in this. And I think that we have a lot to offer and a lot to bring to the table. We have a history and laws that are completely separate from what you guys are used to dealing with. And I think that it's time to kind of try and bring those together. So I think that making partnerships to do lab testing for education and training, and not only economic development, but for our indigenous population, so we can start coming up to speed with the rest of the world and be able to provide science education, training, and communication in a way that is comprehensive and inclusive. And I think that Colorado is in a position to build upon this strength and this opportunity that's probably not going to come around again. So I just really encourage you guys to do that. So, and that's really all I have to share. So thank you.
Hey, Cheryl, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and flagging, our need to make sure that we're looking at other, expanded partnership opportunities. I want to make sure that we're clear in your feedback around our exploring the potential of seeing if there's an opportunity for existing licensed marijuana labs to be able to engage in testing of natural medicines. Is that something you're suggesting against?
No, I think it's completely in line with what they're doing. Now, I want to caution on creating monopolies, but that's the whole thing. When you're building an industry, you want to build, the parts of your industry that you want to become pillars or, big tenants and reliable, because what we need to focus on overall is reliability and consistency and reproducibility. And those are huge things in science. And so making sure that we don't get so overly political that we shoot ourselves in the foot and then the feds come in now that this recommendation has come out from the UN, and then we're all left behind. Because when NIST is already working on standards training, and that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And so they're already working with the marijuana labs. But I just want to make sure that we remember that we don't want to cut ourselves off to the point that we can't gain the ground that we need to before the feds do come in, because they will. And it's going to happen. And we just need to make sure that we create a stronger footprint that they can't just get rid of, because that's going to be an issue. So.
Great. Thank you so much for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, comments from others. We want to make sure we're hearing from you on an example being with what you see Oregon doing. Where do you see or hear about what's working well? What might we need to focus in on and examine further that maybe there have been challenges around? We appreciate what we've been hearing so far, and we still have 15 minutes that we want to make sure we're leveraging with all of you. Noah, please jump back in.
Hi, I just wanted to comment on the aspect of allowing personal use testing. I think that is a really good step. It's because there are going to be a lot of people who choose to use natural medicine in the way that they're familiar with, and not necessarily go to a psychedelic healing center. And so giving those people access to the information for proper dosing, I think is really good part of this whole program. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you. And I know in Allison's presentation, she had mentioned how while the law does provide that opportunity for us to open that door, and we want to make sure we do, and explore that closely. But with that is looking at the order of our focus, and first making sure that we can stand up this testing program, and then following that closely examine where we can provide that opportunity to a pathway for anyone who is possessing natural medicine for personal use under the personal use provisions, where they can leverage licensed testing laboratories. So thank you. Alrighty, I think we have Nicholas who had his hand up next, and then Allison. So I'm not going out of order here. You can take over.
Hey, I was just gonna quickly differentiate what I was talking about between food grade and pharmaceutical grade. Like a pharmaceutical grade would be like a lab. It would be like a clean room. You'd be growing these mushrooms in, a clean room, whereas like food grade basically be like a greenhouse. Just an aspect, the cost of the two different kinds of facilities is really vast. Like a pharmaceutical grade facility to grow mushrooms in would be vastly more expensive than a food and beverage grade facility. That's all I want. I just clarify that, and if it makes any sense.
Great. No, thank you. It's important for us to be thinking about the cost of compliance and how that's going to impact agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go next to Lauren Devine.
Thank you so much. This is Lauren Devine, a licensed attorney in Colorado and Massachusetts. I wanted to echo some of Noah's sentiments about testing available for personal use. Recently looking at some legislation that California has passed, I would encourage that we look at some of that language as well in drafting this rulemaking. The way that California has set it up, that personal testing kits are not on a list of prohibited paraphernalia. So this becomes really important when we're interacting with law enforcement and the way that people are testing their medicine. I think it's a huge harm reduction aspect. And then also looking at, from an enforcement perspective, testing the quantities of these active compounds, psilocin and psilocybin, making sure that there's a distinction between whether the amount, if we're talking about possession limits or dosing limitations, whether that is the active compound or whether it includes the weight or mass of any additional substances. So for example, if psilocybin is mixed with an edible, is it the weight of the edible or is it the weight of the active compound? And making sure that this is reflected in any enforcement moving forward.
Thank you. We'll go next to Sean McAllister.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see many longtime acquaintances here. Thanks for all your work. I don't know, the thing that jumps out mostly for me in terms of lessons from cannabis, I'm not sure that the current system for cannabis really ensures compliance with testing requirements, because the ability of licensees to take their own samples creates an opportunity for misconduct. And I know this is under video, and the agency probably feels like, it can trust its licensees, but I think the testing lab should do the sampling themselves and get us out of this problem in cannabis where people doctored samples, where test labs felt the pressure to return certain results in exchange for the business of the participant. So I just think that's a fundamental flaw to the cannabis program, and we shouldn't repeat that in psilocybin. And I guess also just in general, I'm a little weary of the cost that this will add. So on the other side of this, I think that the regulations need to be reasonable. The risk profile of psilocybin in general is one of the safest. I'm sure you could create contamination to this, but I think with, some restrictions on what can be used to grow and harvest the material, I just don't want to see this be another cost that is pushing people out of the system. And so I know the agency will be sensitive to not over-regulating here, but I'm concerned in general. The regulatory instinct is to over-regulate it first, create too many restrictions, not think through some of the ways. For example, the retesting requirements in cannabis have been a mess over the last 5 or 6 years. And I think they're fixed now, but you've learned some lessons. Please apply those to psilocybin so we don't have similar costs and confusion among licensees. So thanks for all your work to make this an effective system.
Hey, thank you, Sean, for bringing your experience in here and perspectives. And Sean makes just a really great highlight, a point that we want to also make sure that we are considering here is, and recognizing we had a presentation on a high level overview of the cannabis program and testing requirements, and where we can maybe learn from that and see what may be applicable for this new program. However, another lens we need to look through here is what are those lessons learned that we can take from the cannabis experience and make sure that we are getting ahead of that and addressing those and not, putting ourselves in a position of, facing challenges that we had already experienced. So thank you.
We'll go next to RX Hypnotica.
Hello. I'm just wondering also about the different strains when doing testing. There's so many different strains, and when you're going to be giving the medicine to your clients, you need to know which strain does what. Somebody with severe anxiety or PTSD might not work well with something that's highly visual. And so that needs to be taken into consideration. And I've talked to a couple people on the board about this already, and I don't know if we can schedule something for that, but I know that's a huge oversight because you need to know the medicine, what its effects are, not just the strength.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Erica Messenger.
Hi, I'm Erica Messenger. I'm a nurse located in Southwest Colorado. Sorry, my videos. There we go. I think that's a really good point that RX Hypnotica brought up. I'm just curious, I have a question for her. Do you have any evidence? Has there been any tests? Do you have any personal experience with how different strains affect different people coming for different issues?
I have personal and experimental data, nothing obviously official, but absolutely I can definitely contest to the fact that different strains do different things. Some are highly visual, some are not, some are an inner set. So yeah, they all have their own little personality, I guess you could say. So I really think that there needs to be something done in regards to knowing the strain you have, because you need to know that for your clients. I feel that's huge.
Absolutely. It's a very important point because I do understand that as well, that different strains have, like you said, different visuals, or some might be more introspective. I guess my question is, what is your experience with how these might affect different people negatively? So for example, yes, we know these different strains have these different qualities, but what is the real effect on someone with PTSD versus, someone else?
Well, I can say I have PTSD, and when I have had a highly visual, it really gives me more anxiety, more panic attack. And I can't really get the benefits of the psilocybin medicine because I'm too in fight or flight mode.
Okay. And you found that other strains work much better for you, for your condition?
Correct.
That is a great perspective. Yeah, that's a great perspective. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
Thank you both. Erica, did you have another comment or question?
No, that's all I wanted to know. I just wanted to know how those strains really do affect different people. We know they have different effects, but I don't know of any research either that that shows that these different strains or a particular strain is better than another particular strain. And that is going to be an important factor going forward with choosing which strains we use for which people. And especially if it has a more negative effect, like she's saying, that's going to be something that probably needs to be some studying put into that prior to administering these medications.
Maybe even some serious harm reduction testing as well, or education, I'm sorry. Yeah. So
Agreed. Thanks for sharing that perspective, and thanks for sharing your personal story.
yes.
Hi all. My name is John Bigley, and I wanted to kind of jump in on this topic. And I'd advocate for some potential testing for some of the other alkaloids that are in the mushrooms, things like baeocystin, norpsilocin. I think that there may be correlation between the effects of the mushroom and the other alkaloids that may be present. And I think if we can test for those and then have some data collection around, the experience that people have, we might be able to arrive at what can provide an experience or a certain type of experience for participants.
Hey, Johnny, that's a great point. I know we're close to time and want to hear from some other folks who have their hands up, but just also wanted to flag that that's a great point in how we should maybe be thinking about, distinguishing between what do we see as that required testing, those required testing categories, and where might there also be opportunities for other testing for data collection and informing other, future measures. So, and just informing, interested parties, policymakers, researchers. So appreciate that suggestion as well. But let's hear from our final hands, and then we can look to close out here shortly.
We'll go to Lindsay Blum.
Hi, guys. Nice to see you again. I had just, my camera's not working. I had just been thinking, in anticipation for this meeting that, the cultivation, the manufacturer, and like the testing, the cultivation, and the distribution, the product piece, right? Those all really seem to overlap. And so I heard you guys also say, and this isn't really my angle, but super, interested anyway, but I heard you say third-party testing. Is there a vision for overlaying those services so that, one person or one party can, cultivate, test, and distribute somehow, in the same organization? You're saying third party, does that mean a different location?
I don't know, Heather or Allison, if you have insights on that.
I can jump in. I think, again, we would like to hear some feedback on that. The concept, I think, that's outlined by the bill does, indicate an independent facility, which is, I believe, intended to remove any conflict of interest that might arise by a testing laboratory being part of the larger business chain that you just talked about. But again, we definitely seek feedback on that subject because we know that in many industries, laboratories are part of the industry itself. But again, there is, I think, validity to the concept of having to be independent and not having a stake in what the test results are. So again, definitely want to hear feedback on that.
I'll think about it more. Thank you, though.
Thank you. And we'll go wrap it up with Jake McWink.
Hey everybody, Jake McWink here with El Ringo. It's a harm reduction specialty. Quick question, just around if the testing is being included in public awareness campaigns and helping people understand that there's a big difference between taking 1 gram of mushrooms and say 20 milligrams of psilocybin, and testing is a really critical component to that education and understanding, and making sure that people are controlling the depth of their experiences. Culturally, everyone's focusing primarily on weight, and testing is a really important component there. So just curious how that is going to be roped into the public awareness, and then definitely would second the encouraging testing the secondary alkaloids as maybe a mechanism to understand the speciation and the changes of impacts there from the experiences that people would have. So thank you. I know we're at time.
Thank you, Jake. Knowing we're at time here, Carly, do you want to jump in very quickly and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah, hi, Dominique. Good to see everyone. I just wanted to reach out really quickly before we end here to say thank you guys for so much of what you're doing here. I do want to reiterate that we learn our lessons from Oregon, that we reach out to these other states, and also learn our lessons from here in Colorado. We've all been through a lot here. I also want to reiterate that for the cannabis testing requirements, that we really hone in on those edibles, right? We're not going to be smoking mushrooms at this point, from my understanding. And so really honing in on these testing requirements around edibles and what consumption means when it comes to intoxication of pesticides, metals, microbials, when it comes to edible consumption.
Great. Thank you so much, Carly. And that is another area that we will be diving into further, is understanding what are the various methods of consumption that we can expect as a part of products that will be that we'll anticipate being manufactured, or where there's interest, and the scope of products that we should expect to see manufactured in this space. So we do have another meeting coming up, and again, that's focused on cultivation and manufacturing practices. That's scheduled Tuesday, October 3rd from 10 to 11 a.m. Hope to see you all there. And thank you all for sharing your insights, your lived experiences, and your subject matter expertise. We so appreciate your attendance and engagement, and look forward to seeing you all again very soon. We'll also be announcing another round of listening sessions in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that. Thanks. We'll see you soon. Have a great rest of your day.